AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Fred Ronnau. Fred is the CTO of RubiconMD. Fred, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. Fred, let's start with yourself. Can you take us through your journey when you first got involved in technology, some of the roles that you've held along the way, taking us up to your current position here at Rubicon?
Wow, that's a long journey to get through. I think there were two major steps along the way for me. I think the first one was starting out as an engineer and spending some time at Intel, which is a great company, but I didn't realize probably until the next position that I had, which was doing consulting for Deloitte, that I just didn't have as much of a passion for my work. And at Deloitte, I started working in healthcare. And really, once I started working in the healthcare space, it's really where I found my passion in putting, I guess I would say, my intellectual capacity to use to really help shift and change how people are cared for. My personal story is that my mom passed away when I was a little kid. So growing up, growing up with one parent, it was always something that I never really thought of until I really started my career. And then at that point, I realized that, hey, I could maybe even have an impact on the way that care was delivered. So from there, starting there, and then starting on more of a technical route, and then going and getting an MBA, and then transitioning to still where I was working in technology and services, and really was able to then apply at a first job at McKesson some of my interest in my own personal life with what we were doing on the business side. So one of the largest and more interesting projects I had in McKesson was when we were able to acquire a business that took national guidelines from academics in treating cancer patients. And we were able to take that, which was a multi-100-page PDFs, and turn them into a decision tree, and then find a way to actually add through clinical facts, integrating it real time into a doctor's workflow. So anytime they were actually choosing a new line of chemotherapy, they could see a real time what evidence said. Really was the first time I was able to apply my passion and background into transforming the way the care is delivered. And that product even today is in use by probably over a third of all the community oncologists in the US, right? So every time they're treating a new cancer patient, we're having an impact. And from there, how do I just then keep growing my career? I mean, great time at McKesson. I was there for almost 8 years out of business school. Wanted to go and get my foot into doing something entrepreneurial. Again, probably a little bit of background on the side in some of my jobs. So went to help found a startup in Denver. I say that I learned a lot more through that experience in 1 year of not being able to make it out of there than I had in probably the 8 years prior at a larger company. Great experience. I learned a ton and learned how hard it was. And then from there, I wasn't spending as much time in healthcare, kind of missed that, went back to a large insurer, Cigna, where it was a division of Cigna that we were working on. How do you provide kind of partnerships between large insurance companies and doctor organizations? And really was able to keep growing and having an influence there. And then how I got to RubiconMD, kind of the last step, is that the two founders came knocking at my door and said, hey, we're trying to go scale something that we know already helps people today. So at RubiconMD, the core of what we do is we provide what's called an eConsult, but it's really how do you take a doctor or a nurse with a question, allow them to attach medical information to it, route it to, we have a network of hundreds of specialists out there, and get an answer to that and bring it back to the primary care doctor, which at the end of the day really helps them develop a better care plan, gets the patient quicker access to to healthcare oftentimes reduces the need for potentially additional visits, additional expensive specialist visits, or in the case of like the poor and the elderly, sometimes they'll have financial barriers or mobility barriers, and really helps get them better care. And at the same time improves costs. So it can reduce the overall cost because you're providing better quality, more real-time care. So love what they were working on, and they convinced me to come on board and help scale up the team. And I guess that's where I would say I am right now, is just in the midst of a continually growing startup that's looking to keep doubling every year, dealing with the midst of a pandemic, and just everything that comes with it. It's been a blast though so far in the first year here.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the overview. Great to hear that you had such an interest in a particular area, and you were able to follow that curiosity and passion, and it's obviously led to some great things that have come of it. You mentioned the pandemic, which I definitely want to get your take on, given what Rubicon are doing. But before moving on to that, so RubiconMD, so you've given us a high-level overview of the concept, but can you talk us through internally from the use of data, how you guys go about doing what you do, some of the challenges that you face in getting access to this data, collating it all together, and then being that connection point for the specialists and the general practitioners?
Yeah, I think the first really interesting challenge that we have is defining the right data set that you need to drive the interaction and the question. So in this case, we're driving an interaction and a question between a primary care doctor, nurse, and a specialist. And one of the initial challenges is that the company faced is when we started integrating with electronic medical records, we did a great job of being able to bring over an entire chart. But the challenge was when you're throwing too much data and too many lab values, we would give that data to a specialist, and the specialist would just say, this is just too much. It's not specific enough for me to be able to answer this in a timely manner. It's better that at some point you just go see the patient. So in our case, it was, how do you scale back to truly the relevant pieces of information that are needed to drive the most efficient transaction? In this case, it's in between that doctor and the specialist. And what we found is if we just back it down to really, in our case, it's three key questions of how does the patient present? What's your current prognosis and treatment plan? And what's the question for the specialist? And really kind of scaling that back into that, and maybe a couple other key data elements or pieces of information, like a lab report or like an X-ray, but only the things that are really relevant to that question. We could then route that, and you'd actually get specialists that said, oh, I can answer that. And I can answer that educationally, where I can not only kind of give and answer that, but I can help educate that primary care doctor on what the evidence is. I can educate them on what some of the cost-effective treatments are, and really drive an efficient transaction. So I think that's just kind of one example of being wary of just getting too much information that's not really critical to what the problem is that we're trying to solve. And once we got down to that, we were able to really scale from there. That's probably the best example I can think of, and maybe I can talk to a little bit more of some of the future of how we're then trying to leverage those data assets. But I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons learned we'd have as a business today.
Yeah, I absolutely want to get you to speak on leveraging that technology and future growth. But to focus on some of the unique challenges of dealing with medical data as you pull it together from various different sources, can you talk about some of the steps that you guys have taken to categorize it and package it in such a way that will allow you to process things faster and then scale the entire the operation?
Yeah, and I can probably draw on some of my past experience here as well. And it might be a little bit more relevant. So I can kind of go through as we were thinking about how do you apply, when I was with McKesson, how do you apply guidelines to a very clear clinical question? And in that case, what we had to understand is that a guideline that gets published is just a PDF, right? And they can cheat and they can create holes in their logic, and they don't necessarily have to specifically define something based on a term. So probably in that case, what we had to do is we had to go and develop, first of all, our own ontology around clinical concepts. But then we realized all right, is that really enough if you're going to try to go integrate with multiple systems? So then we had to go back to some of the governing bodies and work with them to say, all right, nobody's really defined specific terminologies around genetic markers in oncology, for instance, right? And so how can we work with you to say, what does this mean? And as medicine evolves, how do we map these things appropriately? So in that case, it was really important to be very clear with a doctor on if evidence says this, and this is what they're calling some genetic marker like a HER2 test, we know what that means, right? So in certain cases, it was really important to be accurate enough that if you're going to provide medical information to a doctor, that it's right. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have, and then even in the current role, is that you can't be presenting things that are false to a doctor, because as soon as you do, you're going to lose all your credibility, and you don't get shots at that with a doctor, right? If you return the wrong information or the wrong patient, I can almost guarantee that the doctors are so busy. Once they find out that a tool is not working for them or it's working incorrectly, they're just not going to go back to it.
They just drop it. Absolutely. That's why the accuracy levels are probably in healthcare more important than any other industry that you're talking about data, because the consequences are massive. So your role as CTO, look, you wear multiple hats, as you and I well know from speaking previously. You work enough to cover 2 or 3 jobs, but to continue to achieve such exponential growth with doubling in size, what are the main things that you focus on? How do you strike the balance from running a successful data team, technology department, while also looking to advance the business and continue to strive for innovation?
Yeah, I mean, my first piece of advice, and this is becoming more and more true in technology, is you got to get people that are smarter than yourself to work for you, right? And a lot of it becomes convincing them that it's a place that they can grow, right? That they're going to learn, they're going to be able to grow, and they're going to be able to leverage the skills that they have. Technology has gotten so complex that right now, when we even look at us as a somewhat simple company, right, the difference between a engineer that focuses in development operations and is working in AWS and Amazon versus a back-end engineer versus a QA engineer versus a front-end engineer, right? And those are just the engineering roles. Like, and understanding like how do you get people with the right skills and put them in a position to leverage what they're really good at, right? And I think a lot of my job now is more on, hey, how are we growing and motivating our employees? And I think a lot of it to me comes from getting the most out of the people that you have, right? And starting there. And then I think the CTO, so that's kind of my general management piece of it, right? And what more than anything I'm trying to do. I think the other piece of it then in this role is, how do we understand and leverage my background of working in healthcare for, I'll just say too long, a long time, of the uniqueness of the space and the uniqueness of things in healthcare that as a technology innovation person, you wouldn't think you really care about, but simple things that become so complex in healthcare. Like, for one, is what motivates a doctor to spend extra time doing something, even if they know it's the right thing for a patient, it's going to improve their care, it's going to lower costs. If the incentive structures aren't lined up for that doctor to be able to do that additional task, they might want to do it, but they might not just have the time, right? So understanding just kind of how the healthcare system operates and how incentive structures are handed down, and then how that influences the behaviors and the actions of people that you're designing solutions for, really is where I'm playing more of a role. And then helping to kind of guide the team and the organization to say, well, we solve this problem, but we also have to solve this other problem for doctors if they're ever going to use our software. And it's more thinking strategically around the healthcare ecosystem, and then helping to line that back up to have really smart people go build great products, which at this point, honestly, I don't do too much of or any of anymore, right? So.
You mentioned early on, and it's important we talk about it now, the impact that COVID has had on e-health and technology. And, you know, it's probably brought to the forefront why a service like RubiconMD is so valuable and so important. Could you give us some insight into what the last few months have been like for you guys and how it's accelerated the interest in what you guys are working on?
Yeah, I mean, people have asked me this, and I've started with, I think healthcare has done more to go virtual in the last 3 months. I used to say than in maybe the last 5 years, but the reality is it's done more to go virtual than like through all of the rest of history of healthcare. I mean, just the need for doctors to actually embrace ways to virtually treat patients has really never been the need until there is now. So if you think about what the thing that COVID does, outside of, like, I'm kind of throwing out the core impact that it has just on our emergency systems and everything, and thinking more of like, how does it impact treating patients as we go forward, is it just makes virtual care so much more prevalent and important. And I think one thing you have to realize in healthcare is that you have many doctors that have been doing the same thing for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I mean, you have some doctors that just are good at treating patients, and they don't really like to change their workflow. Like they've gotten pretty good at what they do, but now they have to, right? So now it becomes, they can't go see all their patients in the clinic. So they're being forced to actually adopt more virtual methods of delivering care. And I think now more than ever, we're getting pressured as an organization to do more. How do you help them do more virtually? How do you make that easier for them? We've always been at the forefront of an ally to primary care doctors, and now they're calling on that ally to do more and more for them. And that's kind of the boat that we're in now as we try to continue to grow and scale.
I think that's a great way to lead into the final question. What are you most excited about? You've been very busy, and I know that's going to remain the same for some time now. But looking ahead for what's in store, what are you most excited about for Rubicon?
Yeah, for Rubicon, I'm most excited that change is already here. I'm most scared and excited about it because if we can't be nimble and agile as an organization to meet the new needs of a changing world, we're going to be in trouble. But at the same time, there's unprecedented opportunity to help the way that healthcare is delivered in the US evolve. And it's going to evolve fast, and it is evolving fast. So the challenge becomes, how much can you grow, and how fast can you grow in that sort of an environment? And at the same time, we have to understand that just the emotional impact that COVID has on our employees. So the challenge for me is dealing with that balance, right? Of like the excitement of let's go build something new, when you have people that are dealing with family members that are dealing with health issues related to COVID. You have people that at more than any point are dealing with social isolation and dealing with those issues. So it's one, how do you be supportive, and how do you balance being supportive of the team with actually motivating and firing us up to go change the world of delivery? It's exciting for me. It's scary, and it's going to be a lot of work, but that's why I'm in this sort of a role. That's why I said, hey, let back when Gil and Carlos, the founders, come and plucked me out of a larger insurance company, like, this is the challenge that I was looking for. I'm just excited to go after.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's something we're all excited about, and companies like Rubicon are really going to revolutionize healthcare, not just here in the US, but globally. And it's great to see that this has been accelerated and advanced. We just hope that can continue. So thank you again, Fred, for this. We wish you all good luck in the growth, and we're excited to see what's in store.
All right. Thank you, JP.
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.